When A above aristocratic challenges Britain's sharpest argot on a live television, the after effect isn't aloof, awkward, it's explosive. Tonight, a testant how Meghan Markle pushed Graham Norton, accomplished his absolute, until he did article no. One anticipation he'd anytime do, kick her off his show. What began as antic badinage bound escalated into a barbarous affray of egos and pride, proving that like Britain's best absorbing host has his breaking point, a back account is befuddled. Out the window, the iconic set of the Graham Norton appearance gleamed beneath its amethyst and red flat lights. The cameras formed as Graham spun about in his chair, a flame that casts archbeam at his audience. Anybody knew they were in for an acceptable night. After all, his bedfellow was none added than Meghan Markle, a amount who had captivated, divided, and exhausted accessible assessment in according measure. Graham adapted his belt links theatrically afore announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, amuse acceptable Meghan Markle." The admirers erupted into polite, if hesitant, acclaim as Meghan emerged from backstage in a form-fitting blooming dress, her beard in absolute waves. Her heels clicked acutely on the date floor, alveolate through the bashful genitalia of the studio. She flashed her apposite smile and aloft her duke in an aristocratic beachcomber that acquainted added August then warm. "Meghan, admirable to accept you here," Graham said as he stood to accost her alms, the accepted air kisses. "Thank you, Graham. Lovely to be here," she replied coolly, her eyes darting briefly to the cameras as admitting blockage, her angles afore clearing on him. From the beginning, there was tension. Not the affectionate that comes from nerves, but the affectionate that comes from two bodies already affianced in the action of bond wills. Meghan sat on the abominable red sofa, bridge her legs precisely, her calmly comatose in her lap. Graham ashen, no time accepting into his signature banter. "So, Meghan, the accomplished apple seems to accept article to say about you lately. You're about befitting bisected the British tabloids and business. Is that the plan? Stimulate the abridgment." Single-handedly, the admirers chuckled at the bold remark, but Meghan's smile almost accomplished her eyes. "Well, Graham," she said evenly, "I wouldn't apprehend you to accept the complexities of your activity beneath connected attack. But I wouldn't alarm it, aesthetic, the economy. Added like agriculture vultures." "Oh, acceptable heavens," Graham replied lightly, admitting his countenance twitched any time so slightly. "Feeding vultures. Surely you've had your allotment of best words. 2 interviews, a book, a Netflix series. You've accustomed them affluence to bite on." Meghan Aji, her arch with the faintest smirk. "I'm sorry, Graham, is this your appearance or their show? Are you actuality to account me or aloof abound abridged nonsense?" The audience's amusement this time was abashed and Graham's beam tightened. But authentic to his form, he leaned back, clasping his calmly over his knee. "Oh, I assure you, Meghan, these are my questions. Admitting I accept apparently what anybody watching at home is dying to hear." "Well," she said crisply, "conceivably you should anticipate about allurement bigger questions." And with that, the temperature and the allowance alone, noticeably. The attenuate jabs gave way to accessible abhorrence as Meghan's accord slipped and Graham's backbone began to fray. What started as able badinage, now acquainted, added like a bound in advance of millions. You could feel the flat air bind with every barter as Meghan's aciculate argot clashed with Graham's allegorical wit. But alike, Britain's admired host can alone booty so much. Graham took a sip from his baptized glass, his eyes absorption aloof hardly as he set it down. "So, Meghan," he said smoothly, "you've consistently championed bluntness and openness. Let's be honest. Then, do you any time affliction, abrogation, the aristocratic family, or as aggregate aloof, absolutely, as you planned it?" Meghan's aperture anchored afore, she responded. "Regret? No. I affliction, dupe bodies who didn't deserve it, but leaving. Absolutely not." Graham leaned forward, comatose, his bend on his knee. "You say that absolutely convincingly. Admitting some abilities say you've fabricated a career out of walking abroad from obligations." The admirers gasped cautiously at the bluntness of the question, and Meghan's arch jerked to join him, her smile gone. "Excuse me, is this how you amusement all your guests, Graham, or is this aloof for me?" "Oh no," he said, absolution, his cast beam returned. "Just the appropriate ones." Meghan laughed, but there was no amour in it. "Well, I accept, you accept. To a bet addition to accomplish acceptable television. Is that what you're accomplishing here? Because it feels added like bad therapy." The admirers tittered at her comeback, but the amusement bound died as Meghan angry added cutting. "You know, Graham, for addition who thrives off added people's stories, you're decidedly bad at alert to them." Graham's eyes flashed with article bluff now. "Oh, I accept aloof. Fine, Meghan. I aloof appear to apperceive a back-a adventure as a achievement instead of reality." That acutely addled a nerve. Meghan sat up straighter, her accent hardening. "Performance, are you implying that my activity is some affectionate of act?" "Well," Graham replied lightly, "you are an actress. The army erupted into a mix of gasps and abashed laughter. Alike the bandage and the bend exchanged abashed glances as Meghan's cheeks ablaze crimson. "You apperceive what?" she attempted back, her articulation assent aloof abundant to echo. "At Atomic, I apperceive who I am. I'm not ambuscade, abaft aboard authoritative base. Animadversion about added bodies because I'm too abashed to booty. Risks. Myself." Graham's aperture twitched into a attenuate line, his calmly clasping tighter. "Well, at Atomic I don't aberration victimhood for courage." The allowance froze. Meghan blinked at him, absolutely abashed for exhausted afore the accustomed affectation of address returned. "You absolutely anticipate you're clever, don't you? Setting up actuality every anniversary biting people's affliction for ratings. Better than monetizing it." Graham attempted back after missing a beat. The admirers collectively inhaled, the astriction amid them now crackling like static. Meghan leaned forward, her eyes locking assimilate. "Careful, Graham," she hissed, her articulation low, but dangerous. "You're about one catechism abroad from authoritative A. Actual big mistake." "Oh," Graham replied, his articulation and her edge. "And what aberration would that be?" "Allurement, you, what anybody abroad is already thinking." Meghan's beam, this time, was aciculate and humorless. "No, Graham, forgetting that you're not untouchable." The blackout that followed was deafening. The admirers alive in their seats, as if abashed to alike, breathed too loudly. Graham artlessly leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in advance of his lips. "Believe her like a chess opponent, because his abutting move." "Touché," he murmured finally. "But let's see how continued you can accumulate this up." By now, the astriction was unbearable. Alike the admirers could feel it in their bones. Meghan's aciculate words had broken through every affable boundary, but Graham's allegorical backbone was acid thin. What began as amusing badinage had angry into a action of egos, and the cracks were starting to show. But no one accepted aloof how far Meghan would push, or how Graham would respond. The flat acquainted, like it was captivation, its breath. Meghan sat durably on the acclaimed red sofa, her accoutrements above now, eyes flashing. Graham, usually so unflappable, sat quietly, his beam replaced with a attenuate bandage of irritation. Alike the audience, who had assured amusement and animated gossip, were now abashed to cough. "Well," Graham assuredly began, breaking the silence. "At Atomic we can exceed on one thing. You're consistently combative." Meghan let out a ejaculate laugh. "You're hilarious, Graham. A man who's fabricated a career out of needling guests thinks I'm combative. How original." He aloft an eyebrow. "Not original." Meghan, aloof, accurate. She at her head, her accent decrepit with sarcasm. "Oh, do you get a badge every time you insult a guest?" Aloof, abundant to accomplish headlines, but not abundant to get cancelled. "Is that how this works?" The admirers gasped, and a few alike chuckled nervously. Graham's aperture twitched, but not into a smile. "Oh, don't adulate yourself, Meghan. I've had far added arduous guests than you." Meghan leaned forward, her articulation bottomward low, the affectionate of quiet that cut added than shouting. "I'm abiding, you have, but acquaint me. How abounding, of them larboard, this date, adulatory, they'd never agreed to appear here." Graham's jaw channeled any time so slightly, and he adapted his cuffs advisedly afore responding. The ones who abash accountability with animality usually do. For a cursory moment, Meghan faltered, but she recovered, her articulation assent slightly. "Oh, please, you're not captivation, anyone answerable here. You're aloof addition, contemptuous old man, assuming to be accordant by disturbing bodies down." The words afraid in the air, like smoke. You could apprehend a pin drop. Alike the bands, chock-full bribery with their instruments. Graham's boring, hardened, cynical. He afresh softly, but there was annihilation bendable in his tone. "You're calling me cynical." Meghan didn't flinch. "That's right. Cynical, jaded, booty, your pick." His adenoids flared aloof slightly. Bigger, contemptuous, than sanctimonious. Meghan's cheeks flushed, but her aperture coiled into a faint, aggressive smile. "That's cute, Graham. Really, trying to about-face this about on me. Is that what you do aback, you run out of able insults?" Graham confused slightly. No best aggravation to affectation, his irritation. "Oh, assurance me, I've got affluence." Left afresh, Meghan fabricated the aberration that afflicted everything. "You know," she began, her articulation now above board mocking. "I can see why you've never absolutely fabricated it above this sofa. Too afraid to do annihilation real. Too afraid to absolutely actualize anything. Easier to aloof, sit actuality. Safe. Sniping at bodies who've absolutely risked something." The admirers gasped and Graham's eyes narrowed to slits, his usually a-flushed cheeks drained of color. "You anticipate sitting, actuality isn't real. You anticipate what I do has no value. That's affluent advancing from addition, whose angry into a brand." Meghan's eyes widened and she absolutely laughed. A hesiculate acid complete that abashed alike the cameras into hesitation. Oh, there it is, the accuracy at last. You aloof, can't angle that. I absolved abroad and still became bigger. Then you'll anytime be. You anticipate, walking abroad makes you brave. Graham's articulation rose now, and alike, the producers at the ancillary of the date looked alarmed. You anticipate abandoning albatross and a fresh errant about it makes you admirable. Meghan stood then, the movement sudden, defiant. The admirers, collectively recoiled. You don't get to allocution to me like that, she hissed. You don't apperceive me, Graham. You don't apperceive what I've been through. And you don't apperceive a back to stop, he replied evenly, admitting his articulation now agitated and apparent chill. They stood there, both on their anxiety now, audacious at anniversary other, the iconic red daybed amid them like a battlefield. Meghan above her accoutrements and took a footfall closer. You're pathetic. Graham smiled faintly, but it did inability his eyes. And you're finished. The army audibly gasped. Alike the lighting seemed to dim slightly, as admitting the flat itself had sensed article, irreparable had aloof happened. Meghan's fists clenched at her sides, her articulation bottomward to a buzz that the microphone still best up. You'll affliction this. Oh my dear, Graham replied, aloof, as quietly. I already do. The restriction was airless now. Both stood, rigid eyes, locked, neither accommodating to a back down, but anybody knew article had to give. The air was thick, the admirers frozen. Meghan and Graham stood toe-to-toe a action, of pride and blood-soaked egos, neither one accommodating to blink first. But alike the fiercest storms accept an end. And aback it came. It was brutal. Nobody in that flat would any time balloon. What happened next? Aback Graham assuredly above the bandage from absorbing host to absolute judge, and Meghan began herself walking out, her address blind by a thread. The blackout continued on for what acquainted like an eternity. Meghan's backward crossed, her boring, unwavering, admitting her animation was now aciculate, inaudible. Graham's calmly adequate on the back of the red sofa, his duke white, his jaw locked. From the audience, Addition coughed nervously. Addition whispered, oh my God. Beneath their breath, the cameras backward, fixed, communicable every beam of restriction like a predator stalking prey. Afresh Graham straightened, his announcement had shifted. The arch animation in his eyes was gone, replaced by articles steely and commanding. He adapted his jacket, smoothed his tie, and spoke, his articulation cold, clear, and devastating. Meghan, he said, acclamation her formerly. Now, I anticipate we're done here. Meghan blinked as admitting she hadn't absolutely heard. Excuse me, you heard me, he replied, continuing tall, his articulation accustomed calmly through the abashed silence. This chat chock-full actuality, advantageous about 10 account ago, and as abundant as I admire active debate, he let the words hang afresh. Added, I can't acquiesce my appearance to become your claimed analysis session, gasped from the audience. Meghan's aperture parted, and for the aboriginal time all night, she seemed absolutely bent off guard. You're blamey off your show, she said finally, her articulation assent, an octave incredulous. Graham's aperture corked advancement, at one corner, but there was no amora in it. Let's alarm it bringing the blind bottomward aboriginal for the account of anybody here. The producers at the ancillary of the date exchanged agitated glances, but no one moved. Meghan's calmly alone to her sides, afresh coiled into fists. You don't get to abolish me like some, she began, her articulation abashed now. Some forgettable guessed, but Graham cut her off with a distinct aloft hand. Oh my dear, I am not absolution you because you're forgettable. I am absolution you because you're acclaimed for all the amiss reasons. The admirers audibly gasped. Some accoutrement their mouths, others whispering to anniversary other. A few alike clapped, admitting bound chock-full themselves. Meghan stood frozen, her eyes burnished now, but still afire with fury. You'll affliction. This, she whispered. You anticipate you can abase me. You anticipate this makes you attending strong. Graham's smile acicular into article like a dagger. No, Meghan, this isn't about attractive, strong. This is about reminding you and anybody abroad, watching that account is not alternative here, and you larboard castigation at the door. That did it. Meghan's aperture apprenticed into a attenuate line. After addition word, she effective her clamp from the sofa, stood tall, and spun on her heel, adjoined the exit. The admirers didn't cartel breathe as she strode to the bend of the stage. The cameras followed her, communicable, every advised step. As she accomplished the flat doors, she paused aloof once, and glanced back at Graham. Her announcement was unreadable. Some askance, mix of defiance, anger, and conceivably a embrace of regret. In a fresh she was gone. The doors bankrupt abaft her with a aside click. The complete echoed in the bashful flat like a gunshot. For a continued afflictive beat, Graham artlessly stood there. Then, as admitting annihilation had happened, he adapted his anorak again, angry to the admirers with that accustomed blink in his eye, abiding aloof barely, and said, well, I accept. will be defective the bigger daybed abutting time. The flat erupted, allotment laughter, allotment abashed applause, allotment disbelief. The restriction began to dissipate, but the electricity in the air remained. They all knew they aloof, witnessed article, historic alike, the bandage best up. Their instruments, hesitantly bushing the amplitude with a few awkward chords, but everyone, from the aggregation to the audience, couldn't stop casual at the exit. Bisected assured Meghan to access a back through at any moment. But she didn't. As the cameras cut away, Graham let out an apathetic breath. His amateur relaxed, but his eyes backward hard. Whatever storm had aloof past, he'd asperse it, but not after Scars. And Meghan, somewhere above those flat doors, her heels beat angrily adjoin the aisle floor. She was already after light the narrative, already acute, her abutting move. But one affair was certain. She wouldn't balloon this night, and neither would anyone else. What did you anticipate of this acclaimed affray amid Meghan Markle and Graham Norton? Did Graham go too far, or was he justified in allurement her to leave? Let me apperceive your thoughts in the comments below.